lots and lots of evidence out
Yes,
there that
yes.
having background knowledge really helps with comprehension. But I do think these two studies help bring that point home very powerfully. So the baseball study was done in the late 1980s, so it's been around for a long time. A couple of researchers asked the question, what is more important in comprehension, reading comprehension? Is it general skill, like finding the main idea, or is it how much you know about the topic you're reading about? And they chose the topic of baseball because they were doing this with 7th and 8th graders, and they figured there are a lot of kids out there who are not generally good readers, but they do know a lot about baseball. And so they divided these kids into 4 groups, essentially, depending on how well they had scored on a standardized reading comprehension test and how much they knew about baseball. And then they gave them all a passage to read describing half an inning of a baseball game, and then tested their comprehension of that passage. And what they found was what really made the difference was how much a kid knew about baseball. So the kids who were poor readers, according to the standardized test, but knew a whole lot about baseball, did much, much better than the kids who were the good readers, according to the test, but did not know much about baseball. So that indicates that these skills like finding the main idea, making inferences, they are not skills like riding a bike or like decoding words, because they don't just get better with practice and then it doesn't matter what bike you're riding or whatever. It really, whether you can apply a skill like finding the main idea is going to depend a lot on your background knowledge. And then the WUG study, which was done later by Susan Newman and colleagues, I think is really interesting because it sheds light on this difference in socioeconomic circumstances.
The equity issue,
and it's not really a specialized knowledge. Baseball has its own lingo, but in this WUG study, this was done with preschoolers and from a variety of socioeconomic backgrounds. And the kids were initially tested to see how much they knew about this topic of birds. And then they were read a story about birds, and then test their comprehension of that story, their ability to make inferences, that sort of thing was tested. And the kids who knew more about birds, who were the kids who came from higher socioeconomic backgrounds and had more exposure to that kind of knowledge, they did better on a test of their comprehension of the bird story. Then there's another part of this experiment where they read kids basically the same story, but this time it was about animals called WUGs, who are made-up animals. And so they equalized the kids' background knowledge. None of them knew anything about WUGs because, WUGs don't exist. And this time, after they read the story about WUGs and tested the kids' comprehension, there was no significant difference in comprehension between the kids from higher and lower income families. So I do think that is a really interesting and illuminating study that shows us, what really I think it shows us is not just that, hey, well, some kids are going to know more and that's not much you can do about it. Actually, there is something we can do about it because schools can help, maybe not completely level the playing field, but certainly do a lot more than they're doing now by giving kids who are not picking up that kind of academic knowledge at home, giving it to them in school, which I think a lot of parents probably assume schools are already doing, and a lot of members of the general public. But they're not often doing that until higher grade levels, right. And we need to start early.
Yeah, so it is a really clear way, again, I think, by leveling that playing field, so to speak, by talking about something that is made up, right? Like WUGs. And you talked about in schools, you mentioned it, and I want to highlight it for our listeners, that different than decoding, right? Decoding in terms of the explicitness, the practice, the repetition. And so it's a really interesting time right now to be talking, I think, about the knowledge gap as well as the science of reading and this movement where a lot of folks incorrectly are thinking science of reading is just more phonics, right? That's all we have evidence on. And we both know that is not true. We need to think about this in a more broad spectrum, word recognition, the language skills. And again, as a speech path, I'm always focusing on that language. And then this idea of reading comprehension being the product of these.